My name is Carrie Lee Auger, and I am the Skills Development Manager here at Women's Enterprise Center, working out of our Kelowna office. I develop and deliver training and mentoring programs to help women entrepreneurs across the province. And I work out of our Kelowna head office, and we have an office in Victoria, in Vancouver, and a satellite office in the Tri-Cities. So thank you so much for your patience and for joining us here today. So just a quick review of the agenda. I'll tell you a little bit about Women's Enterprise Center for those of you that are joining us for the first time, the services we provide. I'll introduce our two panelists, and we'll get started right into the discussion to answer the questions you might have about, going from solopreneur to boss. What does that look like? What do you need to have ready? So to get us started today, Women's Enterprise Center, we are the leading business resource for aspiring and established women business owners in BC. We provide business loans of up to $150,000, skills training through live workshops, online webinars, mentoring through peer group, one-to-one formats, and forums such as this. We have business advisory services, and we provide resources from our 3 offices and also online. Our passion is to empower entrepreneurs to their business success. And we're a nonprofit organization funded by the federal government through Western Economic Diversification. And we are part of the Women's Enterprise Initiative, which includes similar organizations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So to stay informed of what's happening in your area or online, or to learn more about our services, be sure to go to wec.ca/enews and sign up for our monthly newsletter and e-blasts about special events. So today's topic, from solopreneur to boss, creating your processes. This is actually the first in our 2-part series on setting yourself up for the successful hiring of a new employee or potentially a virtual assistant, depending on what you need. So you've built a business out of passion and hard work, you know it inside and out, but really, how can you take that and boil it down to a set of processes that's easy for a new employee to understand? You may think hiring someone will solve your problem of having to work too much. And as our panelist Sandra said, spoiler alert, this simply isn't true. So while hiring staff may take some work off your plate, it will also add a new set of responsibilities in managing your team. So doing some prep work now is going to save you a lot of time and headaches down the road. So today on our discussion, we're going to help you understand how to simplify your business and service offering, really define and hone in on your customer avatar or your client persona. We're going to draft some initial core processes for serving your clients, right? What's that going to look like? And really map out your customer journey. So to help us learn all of those things today, we have 2 amazing panelists who have both been volunteers for Women's Enterprise Center before. We have Dannison Vaughn. He's the founder of ReFood in Vancouver, among many other things. He's an entrepreneur whose story has been explained several times, including by CBC Vancouver TV, CBC Radio, PhilippineCanadianNews.com, The Province, Vancouver Sun, and many, many more. He makes sure that new entrepreneurs find cost-efficient ways to start their ventures and reduce risk of startup. He walks new entrepreneurs through the processes of starting a business and improves their strategies to help maximize their budget for the venture. He loves entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs get their ventures off to a great start. And he's been a volunteer mentor for Women's Enterprise Center. So welcome, Dannison, and thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. It's great having to be here.
Yes, and also joining us from over in Victoria on sunny Vancouver Island today, we have Sandra Graham, founder of Get Simple Systems. Get Simple Systems works with small businesses and companies that are in the process of franchising to document and refine their systems and processes. This includes drafting operations manuals, as well as helping companies develop and refine their systems and processes further as they grow and scale. With a background in operations and strategic planning, Sandra has over a decade of experience working in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors across various industries, including health, education, food and beverage, and tech. And prior to starting Get Simple, Sandra worked as an operations consultant in the franchise industry. And in her off time, she enjoys being active, often spotted walking around with her miniature Dachshund and her fiance enjoying coffee and snacks in Victoria. Sounds like a great day. And Sandra has also volunteered and written a few blogs for us, which we will share links to those in the follow-up email as well. So welcome and thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Carolee.
And thank you both. So I read the bio. We're very excited to have you here, but I really would like to start by letting each of you tell a little bit more about your own stories, so our audience can learn more about you and your background and what you're passionate about in regarding to supporting entrepreneurs. So Dennison, let's start with you. So tell us more about you and why you do what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dennison, and I'm an entrepreneur. So a lot of the aspects that I find when I was starting off a business, when I first started, I actually went the wrong direction. So I'll keep it nice and short and simple. When I first started, I decided hey, I want to start a business, but instead of doing one business, let's just do 3. And that was the wrong direction to go during that process. But over time, developing and then reorganizing my thoughts and being able to understand how to do business, it made it a lot easier afterwards, understanding to create a process. If you want to do more than one, or even just get one to the next level, you need to make sure that each business goes through a progression to get it to the next level, which allows it to get it on that portion. So I won't take too much time on that because I would love to explain a lot more of the methodology, but I definitely want to share that aspect with you guys because it's something very close to me that when I was an entrepreneur, I wish I was taught these kind of things, like how do you make things more efficient and how do you get to that next level rather than being the one person, the one person team where you have to do everything and really try to scale and get it to that next level.
That's great. Thank you, Dennison. And I think we can all appreciate that. I know a lot of our clients and people joining us today are solopreneurs, and sometimes it can, pardon me, feel a bit overwhelming when you feel like you have to do it all yourself. So, when you decide to bring on some support, it's great to have this advice and some tips and tricks before you kind of dive into that. So thank you again for joining us today and volunteering to support our clients. And Sandra, your turn. What are you passionate about, and what are you hoping for everybody to get out of today?
Yeah, I think my story, I imagine a lot of people can relate to this. I started Get Simple Systems when I realized I wanted a different kind of lifestyle. So my partner also has his own business. He does digital marketing for small businesses as well. And I thought, wow, this is really great. I would love to be able to have a bit more flexibility and freedom. And my partner is an excellent entrepreneur. My parents also ran their own business. They had 2 businesses growing up. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. But one of the things that I learned really early on is you got to get your systems and processes in place. I already had an idea of that, having a very strong background in operations, but I learned firsthand just exactly what that means. And letting go, it's really easy to get emotional in your business, and recognizing that you can't build a mountain overnight. It's a really long, progressive journey. And so my partner always says, you're running a marathon, the longest marathon that you will do in your life. So get comfortable, make sure you've got strong friendships, make time for family, and take care of yourself.
Oh, that is great advice. And I like the analogy with the marathon, because it is, right? There's not a lot of, get rich quick or overnight success. You see a lot of stories of these entrepreneurs say, overnight success, I've been doing this for 5 years before this happened, but it was just under the radar, right? Behind the scenes. So it is, you got to put in the time, but you, again, make time for yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So to, preface our call today, the 3 of us got on and had a great chat beforehand to go, okay, what really do we want the audience to get out of this session today, as that first step of, okay, I've realized I need some help. I can't do it all by myself. I need to bring on some support. So some of the questions we want people to be thinking about as we're going through the session today is really getting an understanding of your business and yourself, So consider, what do I love to do? What do I need to do? What do I tolerate doing? Where do I need help and support? What am I comfortable letting go of? And then how do I want my business to grow, right? How am I going to get that increase in revenue? Is it increasing prices? Is it increasing services, etc.? So it's all kind of that, I'm going to call it the behind the scenes work that you have to do so that your business is ready to grow and bring on that person. So the first thing we were going to talk about today is simplifying your business and service offering, right? So we always want to maximize opportunities. Starting a business, you have this fear of saying no to anything that's asked of you. We try and want to, please everyone all of the time. We want to give everything they want. So we tend to say yes, especially when starting out, because you're trying to build a business, you're trying to make money. But when we try to be everything for everybody, we run the risk of being nothing for nobody, right? So as we consider this, simplifying your business and what you offer, and whether that's products or services, where, can an entrepreneur start? What are some of the things that they can do in this process to really nail down what is their business and what do they offer? So maybe Sandra, if you want to give us some insight onto what that process would look like for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like inviting somebody into your house, right? So you wouldn't invite them to a house that's completely messy. You'd want to kind of clean up a little. So before you hire somebody, clean up shop, like figure out what it is that you do and what supports and support systems you need in place to do that really well. So when we chatted last time, Carolee, I mentioned really simplifying your service offering. So pick one thing early on in your days, pick one thing and do it really, really well. And then once you've mastered that, consider adding another service, but only if it's complementary to what you're already doing. When you're kind of recreating your service offering, and every single time you're saying, oh yes, I can do that and I can do that, you're figuring out how to do that every time. So you never really figure out how to do it well. You're always kind of fumbling. And if you're doing business like that and then hiring somebody to come and join you on that journey, it's going to be really stressful for them. You're not going to maximize your dollars. And likely they're going to burn out or give you their notice and pick somewhere else to work.
Great, thank you. And Dennison, what would you add to that as far as, really coming up with a simplified business offering?
As far as the simplified business offering goes, I was like always wondering whenever an entrepreneur comes out there and they're trying to develop the skills, I always find that there are gaps inside the service offering that the entrepreneur does and doesn't do specifically. So kind of building on what Sandra says, there are a lot of aspects of what the entrepreneur likes to do, what their strengths and weaknesses. And I always find when I work with clients, when it's dealing with very specifics, say, for example, finance or those aspects, they kind of disregard it. And they don't even look for someone to, say, hire part-time. Even I've been in cases where they don't even have a bookkeeper when they're starting off, or they don't really understand the processes and they need more sophisticated systems, whether it's them doing themselves or bringing in a bookkeeper, like with that aspect of software. So I always find just identifying your strengths and your weaknesses in the very beginning is a very important as far as the service offering for the client from my point of view.
Great, perfect. And then, so thinking about that and maybe providing some tips and tricks again, what are some tools, blogs, resources, where could we provide additional support to the people on the call today that are looking for how they can do that? How can they do a self-assessment, what kind of their skills, strengths, passions, next we're going to talk about really defining the customer. So how do they pick that niche and target market? I think, Sandra, you had mentioned, and I hope this is in the right spot, but the strategizer. Some tips and tricks. So maybe you can just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so let's take the instance where you are, and I see this very common with people who maybe their business is being a virtual assistant. And they're doing a little bit of everything. They're doing social media for people. They're managing their email inboxes, and just pretty much everything under the sun. So a great place to start is to figure out really what it is that you do for your customers and can do really well. And so Strategizer offers, it's called a value proposition canvas, and it just kind of walks you through. It's laid out really nicely, and it helps you think about what are the jobs that your customer is trying to achieve. What are some of their pains and what are some of their gains? And then you position that in response to like the services that you're offering. And then from there, I would suggest taking time to actually research what your competitor does. So what are they doing really well? What are they not doing well? And how do you compare to that? What are some things that you can do differently to make yourself more competitive? So this part is all about making yourself as competitive as possible. And that quite often is a lot easier when you go niche.
Right. And we're talking about, as you know, we said at the beginning here, like pick one thing that you do, pick one thing that you do well, build the business on that, and then consider adding additional things. So again, that really takes that into the, okay, I picked a niche. Now I know who my target market is.
Yeah.
So that brings us, kind of segues right into the next thing that we're going to chat about now, is defining your customer avatar, right? So we've clearly defined our business and the service or product that we're offering. We've determined the target market that we're going to go after. So now, how do we make sure that we're going to speak to the right audience when we're promoting our business and services? So, Dennison, I'm going to let you jump in here first and just, explain to everybody really what is a customer avatar. Why is it so important to have before you create some of those systems and processes that you potentially are going to share with a new hire?
Absolutely. Basically, when you're working with your customer avatar, a customer avatar is basically understanding exactly the thought process of the way your customer buys. So you want to know exactly, is my customer a 40 to 50-year-old female that enjoys vegan food, that, you really want to understand that example of a customer avatar. So for example, one of the customer avatars I work with currently right now is a senior that has mild disabilities that's looking to travel. It's very targeted as well, but understanding exactly what your customer thinks, what their fears, what their pains are, and understanding their inner thought process. Mm-hmm. It's very important when you're describing your customer avatar. Normally I do accompany like a positioning document first, and then afterwards I create a product document to understand exactly what it is what my customer avatar is thinking about and what is my product, to make sure that they actually match. Otherwise, I may have a customer avatar, but perhaps my product also doesn't match that portion. So really understanding your customer avatar on a very deep level, like exactly how they buy, where they buy, is very, very important. For my example, for myself, I'm knowing that customer avatar that I just mentioned earlier, they're not necessarily as interested on Instagram, but they understand that they actually like some older forms of traditional print. They are also getting more active on Facebook. So understanding where they are, what regions they hang out in, it's so important. So when you're starting to do that targeting, if you hit that customer avatar, you understand exactly who you are after and speak their language, it becomes very easy for you to not so much sell, allow them to buy your service. If you know, where do they like to eat? What do they like to eat? What time do they like to eat? It makes it a lot easier for you to understand where that customer avatar is. And then now translating that to your team with your new hire, when you're building out those processes and formalizing it, and you're building the systems as you're going along with your sales process, it becomes a lot easier for you to understand. So when I work with my teams, I make sure before I formalize, the team themselves get to understand exactly how the customer would think. So when they're writing processes, or if they're doing anything, they understand this is exactly how our client thinks, So you have to put yourself in that mindset so you understand how to talk about it, whether you're writing copy, building the website, any aspect of those lines need to communicate back. And if the vision is not communicated with the team, even if it's just one VA, and they think they're just doing tasks, I even spend time to make sure that they understand, well, this is who you're talking to and why.
Very good. And that's so important, right? So that everyone understands who the customer is. And Sandra, maybe you can elaborate on that, depending on how many services, especially looking at, you work with a lot of franchises, can you have more than one business persona or client avatar? What might that look like?
Yeah. I want to answer that question, but I just have a couple of other points that I just want to add
Perfect.
to the customer avatar. And it's just to emphasize, like, besides knowing what your customer wants, the other benefit from it is it allows you to learn to say no. So when you've got somebody who comes in and says, I potentially want to purchase your services or buy your product, if they don't meet your customer avatar, then you already know that they're probably not a good fit. And the ones that aren't your good fit are the ones who are going to be asking you to give them a discount, see if there's a different way that you can provide the services so that it fits with them. And it makes it a lot easier. So you can say no, you know that it's not going to work. You're not going to make enough money likely, because the other piece to your customer avatar is you're going to figure out what's their price point. So you're not going to try and sell a $500 item to somebody who doesn't meet that financial demographic.
Right.
So those are two other good reasons to have that. And then just leading into, can you have more than one client avatar? Absolutely. So right now I do. So mine are small businesses and the other one is franchising. They actually have very similar needs. So quite often what you have is predominantly your customer avatar is like 60% of your customers are, for example, small businesses. And then 40% of them are companies that are in the process of franchising. That's an example. So
Great.
You understand that breakdown.
Perfect. And then Sandra and Dennison, you can both chime in here. What kind of tools or resources do you recommend, for doing this work? Because really it's part of kind of the market research as well, right? Like you're one to make sure your business is viable, but also, are there enough clients that you can serve? So what are some tips and tricks for somebody that wants to get started and really is like, I just don't know where to begin? Dennison,
Yeah.
we'll start with you if you want.
Yeah, sure. As far as tips and tricks, like I always do now specifically make sure I do a lot of research as well when I'm going in there and actually talking to the clientele and, doing things like FAQs and whatnot, finding out exactly what they're thinking about to see if the product actually has a market fit or not during that. And are they willing? Is there actual pain and how does it work during that process? As far as tools goes, I always find that when you're dealing specifically with your customer avatar, I always find that it's best to split up your time and your efficiency during that aspect. So I use like a lot of Calendly, piggybacking off of what Sandra said earlier. A lot of clients, if they don't necessarily fit your mold of who your client is, your customer avatar, they'll try to take advantage. So when I work with a lot of my specific clients, I always tell them, hey, you need to spend a lot of your time here and put them on the Calendly. So if you guys don't know, Calendly is a tool that allows you to let people schedule with you. So if you do have new prospects that are interested, normally I would just send an email and here's my Calendly, and then you preset the times that they can just meet up with you. And going back again, that puts you in control of your time rather than being at the whim of your client. Because if a lot of people that I work with, I ask them, have you set a boundary of when you can be reached? It's like, no, they called me at 3 a.m. kind of thing if something is wrong. And I tell them, like, that's not very fun. And he's like, no, but you haven't crossed the line where these are the rules of engagement of how you need to communicate with me. And going back to what Sandra's saying, building that balance is important. If your clients don't know where the line is of how to communicate with you and how fast you communicate with them or in those lights as well, it becomes very difficult. if you just field calls every single day, you're not going to be that effective in communicating. So definitely Calendly is a good tool. I also alluded to using, before I was using Jira, but now I'm more or less, as for entrepreneurs, really looking into Trello as an organization system. It makes it a little bit easier, task lists and those kind of tools as well. And if you have a VA or other employees, you can start sending tasks. And the great thing about these two is they're free, but if you want to upgrade to the more sophisticated aspects, it's something that you can look into. But I think for now, those are the two tools I would think that really help my teams out when just creating time as well.
Yeah, and that's a great way. We've started using that here as well, to schedule phone calls, because you can do that, which is also important. Again, like part of that simplifying your business is to make sure that you have blocks of time where you can focus on different tasks without distraction. So yeah, having hey, just sign up, use my calendar here. And again, there's the basic model where I think you can have the one appointment type. And if you do a paid service, you could have like a 15-minute call, you could have a 30-minute consultation, you could have a 1-hour meeting. So there's many different options. And I see it in the chat window here. Thank you everybody for asking questions about the tools. We'll try and pop those into the chat as well, but we'll also send links to all of these tools and resources that we're mentioning in the follow-up email. So keep that in mind as well. We will provide all of that for you. So going through there again, yes, really defining a customer. And I had that happen in my own business as well, made that same mistake of knowing that this, particular client didn't really fit my customer avatar, but you know what, it was kind of a friend that I had. So I tried to manipulate my service to provide for them, and it just ended up working out well. So again, sometimes you are better off saying no, as scary as that can be. So putting in that work and that research into really defining your customer, again, is going to, save you some time, resources down the road. So now we're thinking of some of those core business processes again.
Sorry, Carolee, do you mind if I jump in? There's just a couple of things that I want to add.
Yes, go, please.
Yeah, so part of your customer avatar is basically doing market research. And some great sources for finding information on the demographics of potentially your customer profile is the real estate website. So it'll give you a breakdown of income in certain pocket neighborhoods. So that's really useful for figuring out whether or not you're targeting the right people who can actually afford your services. That's so right. One of the things that I can do definitely, Carolee, is include some of those data sources that you can go through afterwards, just to make sure that you've got enough people, enough customers in your pool that you can actually sell a service to, and those people can afford your services.
That's right. Perfect. Great. Thank you, Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
So here, some of the processes that we really want to streamline before you bring somebody in. And again, a lot of us, the solopreneurs that are out there, joining us on the call today, a lot of what we do, like, you love it, it's your passion, you know exactly how to deliver the product or service that you want to deliver, but it's all in your head, right? So when you bring somebody on, it's key to have some of these things documented so that you have some history there, you have some tools, you can create a job description. So what we want to do is create some of the processes that refer to the delivery of value to your customer by providing services or products that meet their needs, right? So the end-to-end practices that deliver and will help you achieve your goals. So they can be related to sales, to marketing, to HR, to your finances. So, really, Dennison, I'll let you chime in here first, but when we think of this overwhelm, like, oh my gosh, I have to get everything that's in my head down on paper, or I have to create these processes, where should we focus first? Like, is there a more logical order? What is the first thing we should get down on paper that we're going to share with potentially a new hire?
Yeah. So when I'm looking for working with a new hire as well, like I want to make sure I have everything organized. So again, going back to the tool Trello, I make sure I put everything in there first so that I can see everything and differentiate everything and divide it based on those terms as well, like operations, marketing, human resources. If there's IT, finance, of course, is in every business, and sales. So, and in some cases, customer service as well. So I would just create, and what I do is I just create columns for each one of them. But then what happens is I use a technique that I've been using over the years, uh, where you basically want to reverse engineer every single one of your tasks and then figure out what task makes the most sense to go with first. So a lot of those aspects that I find is I'm trying to achieve a goal, and then I'm trying to figure out what are those tasks. Then during those tasks, I also find out, is there any repeatable tasks? And I try to figure out the specifics during that process when I'm hiring a new hire, because we had this kind of talk beforehand, and I'm pretty sure I could relate with a lot of the people here as well on the phone. Sometimes you're doing things that are not necessarily generating revenue for yourself. So it's not exactly worth your time to be doing it, but you do need to do it. So for example, you may be closing a sale and that may be worth $50 per hour, but then checking your emails, for example, and that people don't think about it, like I want to check my email, hiring a VA or someone local, that may just cost 5 hours. So it's almost kind of like dating out which one is the more priority aspect of when you're trying to figure out where should I be spending my time and why, and which activities are actually going to drive the business, and which repeatable activities I can just hand off and give to somebody else. But before handing off, make sure everyone here, any activities that you hand off to an employee, part-time employee, VA, anything along those lines, you understand those aspects. I've seen so many people get taken advantage of, and they think, oh yeah, I'm just going to give the VA the marketing and they're going to know how to do it. Or I'm going to give them the HR and they're going to do it. Without your own systems and process in place and to be able to check, there's always aspects of the thought process of, oh, I just hand it over to them. But it's not like that. You do need to train them, have those training processes in place so they could take it over and have mechanisms where you're checking in with them to allow them to be able to do the work for you. If that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when we had the call, you were talking about systematizing the revenue generating aspects first. We spoke about, where are the leads coming in, right? What's that lead generation process? What do you do for onboarding a client? And then also potentially upselling, right? So you've done, the work of the first contract. How do you then sell them on potentially some additional services or an ongoing contract, right? So really looking at focusing, again, as all entrepreneurs we need to do, bringing the money in and making the most of your time as, I'm going to say, the service or the skill that you are selling. So that's great. And I like how you say as well, for the entrepreneur, the skill set must be there. You must understand the task, what the task is that you're asking somebody to do, so that you can follow through, make sure that they understand, and make sure that the work is being done properly. And again, getting rid of some of the repetitious and recurring tasks. Bookkeeping is one of them, as you've mentioned, checking emails, some of those things that, yes, you can have some oversight, but it's still going to free up, I'm going to call it, a lot of your billable time. So some great advice there. And then Sandra, so we've done that, right? They've put in the work. They understand that process about, what happens to either, get their customer through marketing, they close the sale. How do you decide then which processes and tasks we want to include in this new position to support me, so that I can write the job description and then find a suitable candidate for that job? Because I've also seen people make mistakes with hiring for the person without the job description, and then that's just confusing for everybody. So how do we decide and create that job description?
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Carly, is we write operations manuals for companies.
Yes.
And the way we approach the work is actually starting with the job description. So the manual becomes an extension of the job description. Anything that's listed under the responsibilities is captured in the manual that clearly outlines how they're to greet customers, how they're to transact sales. So these core business functions that Danison was mentioning earlier that make you money.
Perfect.
So yeah, I would focus on the job description first. Ask yourself, what is it that I need this person to do? What is it that I'm asking them to do? And goes back to why Danison said it's really important to have a firm understanding. You don't have to be a master in it, but at least kind of understand, say you're hiring somebody for marketing, understand what the platforms are for marketing, understand what, average spend would be for the type of marketing channel that you're hiring this person to work in, understand the general process for that so that you can oversee and help them be accountable to the job that you're asking them to do. Because ultimately that's what everybody wants. They really do want to be able to hear feedback. They do want some sort of accountability so that you can say, you've done a really great job, or here's some things for you to improve on. Despite what maybe some people say, nobody likes to go and swim in the abyss.
That's right. That's right. And I know I have my notes from our call here, and I cannot recall, my apologies if it was Sandra or Danison that spoke about the ABCD map. So that
was Danison, yeah.
Yeah. So Danison, I'll let you just touch on that briefly on, we've gone through these processes, we've gotten written down, we've created this job description now, and you're considering adding that person and building your team. If you can touch on the ABCD map and how that works, I think that would be a great tool as well for our listeners.
Oh yes, the ABCD. Yeah. So there's been different variations. I heard that there was a different version of this before with Guy Kawasaki, and he had like the A players, which is like the employees, but I had a different version of it. Yeah. So what happens is whenever I'm working with people that I want to either partner in my business or employees, I want to make sure that they have these characteristics. And there's two columns that I have. One is willing and one is skilled. So I want to make sure that when I'm working with my employees, I'm very careful with their characteristics, regardless of what the expertise is, right, and what they're looking at. So when I look at their ABCD, so A essentially just means they're willing, so they're highly motivated, they have the energy and the time and they want to do it. And then skilled essentially means they have that expertise in that skill. So that person would be more or less an A player. Then you're running into the B player, which is the exact different kind of person. They're highly willing, but they most likely don't have the skill, but they're willing to learn. So that's also a very good aspect to have too. Now, here's where it gets a little bit challenging. You run into a C player. A C player is not willing, but they know they're good. So basically, I don't know if you've ran into these kind of people where you feel like they're very knowledgeable, very smart, but they're not motivated to do much. You really need to stick a carrot in front of them or pay them more money just to make them move. And then the last person also is obviously not willing and not skilled. So those kind of people, when you're hiring, you always have to be careful. They may think they know what they're doing, but they just don't have the skills and they don't have the motivation to do so. So when I look for people that I try to bring into the business, whether it's hiring or say as a VA or employee, I make sure they're along those lines of being an A or a B at least. So whether they have the motivation to work and have a really good work ethic and also are highly skilled, that's great. And if they're really willing but don't have the skills, make sure we have the ability that they can allow themselves to grow within the organization. So I'm very careful with making sure to just bring A or B people inside the organization, because it's really, really hard to push somebody they know they're very smart, but they're just not motivated. So it's kind of puts a drag inside of your organization in some aspects as well. If you want to really grow and have that energy and you're like, oh, I'm trying to get the numbers in, but they're not going to be done for like next month, and he's taking it too easy. Maybe that's not the right kind of person that maybe the right fit for your business. Whether it's I look at it whether in terms of whether I'm just hiring them as a subcontractor to do the task as well. So I'm very careful in those aspects when I'm bringing in that, in this example, an employee, to make sure they are either very willing and skilled, or at least willing where I can give them the skills so they can grow within my organization.
Right. Perfect. And then I'm going to take that from kind of the first thing we were talking about, simplifying your business and your service. And we spoke about, really for the entrepreneur to be self-aware of their own strengths and skills, and, where they're going to excel in the business. And maybe, bookkeeping comes up a lot as one of the ones that people want to give away because it's not enjoyable to a lot of people. I happen to really enjoy it, but I'm not the norm. So that's something where, again, you want to find somebody that does have that skill set to support you, but make sure that you have the understanding. Perfect. So quickly now, the last thing we want to think about when we're bringing on that new employee, so they understand us and our business, who our customers are. So, we've told them what our business is, what's our niche, who's our target market. We've told them who our ideal customer is so that they know who they are interacting with. We've got some processes down on paper. They've got a job description. So now they really need to understand what is the customer journey through our business, right? So a customer journey map is a powerful way to visualize that customer experience and the touch points that they have with your business. And sometimes that sounds a bit overwhelming and intimidating, but it shouldn't be. It's nothing. It's just, again, kind of getting that flow from start to finish of what your customer is experiencing so that you can interact with them along that journey appropriately. So Sandra, if you could maybe just kind of some key highlights of what a customer journey map is and why it's really beneficial to have one, that would be great.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, it's a visual representation of all the touch points that you have during your relationship with your customer. And it's not meant to be an intimidating process. In fact, it's an opportunity to strengthen your business and your service offering. So quite often what happens once you start to get it down on paper, you can see that while you have for example, a contact page on your website and people can get a hold of you that way, you realize a majority of people actually get a hold of you on Facebook or Instagram for whatever reason. And you don't have a process in place for making sure that you check Facebook regularly, making sure that you check Instagram regularly, or you haven't put any processes in place for delegating that task. So being able to put it down visually creates that opportunity for you to say, I need a new process, I need a new system to support what my customers are actually doing. And then just as we mentioned earlier, throughout the whole relationship of your customer, it's another opportunity to figure out where you could either offboard them in a really great way that they become what we call ambassadors for your brand. So they're very, very happy customers and they go off and tell their friends, and in turn you get referrals. So it's a fantastic low-hanging fruit way to grow your business. Mm-hmm. Or you create such a great relationship that you make it really easy to sell them another service or product. So for example, with my customers, one contract is actually worth 3 or 4 contracts. And then in turn, they tell their friends that they've really enjoyed the services. They've learned a lot about their business, and I get more customers that way. So it's meant that in my first 2 years of operation, I haven't needed to develop a website. I haven't needed to go out and seek more customers. And I hit max capacity pretty quickly. So in the first 6 months of operation, I had to hire 3 staff pretty much right off the bat. So that's an example of what it can do for your business when you look at it that way.
Great. And anything to add to that as well, Dennison?
As far as what I enjoyed listening to on Sandra's side is a lot of those, like, for example, the sales process is super important. Checking out all your social media content and having it funnel into your sales funnel, having a way to close it. I find it very interesting as well, and it's very important because that's the life, kind of like the life of the business. If you do, I understand this as well where Sandra's coming, because when we were, when I used to, probably a few months ago, was in the restaurant business, essentially, didn't do any flyers, didn't do anything, just generated a lot of word of mouth, and people brought other people, and it just took time, but then that's how it kind of grew during that aspect as well. So it's very important to make sure you actually have those systems in place where you can accept all different aspects. One thing I will add though was, as you get that employee, like what Sandra did, creating that work environment was so important. Over and over again, that I've heard in the last 9 years working with people in like specifically hospitality and other industries, they've been always complaining about how hard it is to find staff to hire and whatnot. But I found the main weakness is just the ability to readjust for the market. And for example, as you guys know, like in the food industry, it's very hard. People don't necessarily want to work in that food industry. They think that, we're being paid very little for the amount of work that we're doing. I could just be doing something else and still be paid more. So this is where a lot of aspects where your systems come into place, where you need to create a lot of different cultures inside of your company to make it very like kind of stand out. So doing little gestures like what Sandra was mentioning beforehand, like to get referrals, was very important. So for example, when having employees, we had to make sure that they felt at home, but being very firm with them when needed, but understanding to bring in that whole family concept as well. Like if they were being picked up by, a mother or say a father, it's like, hey, give this to your father kind of thing. It's like, well, what's this? Oh, it's a meal that I came up with. I hope he enjoys it. Just opening up that aspect as well to build the community is super important. Then they go, oh my goodness, chef, that was so delicious. They come over, they eat, they tell everybody else. Like you need to do those different aspects, because I'm kind of noticing they're just doing business as usual, and that's not how you're going to build a community, a culture within your company that people want to help each other within it. And I think sometimes people take it a little bit too literally, like, no, I run my business like this, and this is the way it needs to be done. And that's it kind of thing, without kind of like
for sure
forgetting about that aspect.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's a huge part too, right? That is one of the biggest challenges we hear about, is hiring and retaining staff. And I think what we've learned today and some of these processes that we want to set up, it actually makes onboarding that new employee that much easier for you as the employer. And it's very welcoming for the employee. It's like, okay, you're ready for me. My desk is ready. I have a handbook, right? I've got my employment contract. I know I have clearly defined, goals for the role that I have. And you've given me all the tools that I need to fulfill the job that you're asking me to do. And I think that's key as well, right? That whole onboarding process for when you're bringing those employees on. And that could be a whole other forum on its own. And I might mark that down, because that would be a great follow-up one. What does that look like? What do you need to have ready? You've done all this work. In the next session, again, we're kind of build on this again. And what is it that you need in the second session, to service 2 to 5 more customers, especially if you yourself are providing all of the service delivery. How do you leverage some of the systems and processes and people that we now have in place? And again, really going into defining the role of the employee. So I look forward again to our chat again next week. So if anybody hasn't registered for that one, it's on next Wednesday, same time, March 27th at 10 a.m. And Sandra and Dannison are going to be joining me again. So I look forward to that. And then, just kind of in closing, because I promised everybody, even though we started a few minutes late, we'd wrap up on time. So just reminders, this session has been recorded, so you will get a link for that. We're going to provide some recommended resources that we spoke about, like Strategizer, Calendly, Trello, some links there. One other thing we didn't touch on today, but I'll include that because it is really a great resource, is the E-Myth Revisited book. So I'm going to include that in there as well because we want everything to be nice and simple and streamlined for you. And again, I don't see anything in the Q&A. We had a few chat questions that I hope we've answered, and I will double check to make sure. But Sandra and Dennison, thank you very much for joining us here today, for everyone on the phone. And I just want to, Sandra and Dennison, give you, one last closing remark as we wrap up today. So Sandra, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I guess I hope everybody found this really helpful. As Carolee mentioned, we're going to send some more resources and tools. And then if you have any direct questions, I'll make sure to include my contact information. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions people have.
Great. Thank you. And Dennison.
Yeah, no, it's awesome that you guys are here. I feel like everyone here is like obviously trying to grow their business, and it always becomes challenging as well. And I hope a lot of the content that we shared with you is of value to you. Of course, if you need to get a hold of me, I have my email available as well, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to reach out if you have any questions towards this aspect. It's always very daunting when entrepreneurs try to figure this out, and I try to be as encouraging beforehand. I personally like to mentor right now because when I first started business, I thought I knew everything, and that was proven wrong. And now I swear by it. So that's kind of a personal thing on my end to make sure I want to kind of share those tips, kind of give you guys that landmine map and say, hey, don't do this, this, and this. Like, why? Because, this will cost you 6 months. This will cost you 30 grand. This will, and then just to avoid those things that I've already went through, so you don't have to do that go through that same pain.
Perfect. Great. So yes, as I mentioned, session 2 is next week, same time, same place, March 27th at 10 a.m. And then also, we spoke about perhaps getting rid of the bookkeeping task. So we do have a couple workshops coming up on financial understanding. We have one April 5th in Vancouver and one April 24th here in Kelowna. And it gives you that knowledge so that if you do hire a bookkeeper, you know what statements you're looking at, what questions to ask so that you can understand what's happening and to make sure everything is getting recorded as you like. So we'll include links to all of those and the additional resources in that follow-up email. And as always, we have our brief questionnaire that we'd like you to give feedback on this session. And also, if there's anything else that you would like us to talk about on another session, there's an area that you need some support or an idea that you have, or if you have a recommended panelist, you yourself, our participants today might have something you want to share with our audience. So that quick questionnaire that we send out is a great way for you to do that as well. So just a couple minutes after 11, we're finishing up pretty much on time. So again, thank you everybody for your patience at the beginning. Thank you to Sandra and Dennison for volunteering to support our audience today. And we'll see you back here again next week. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.